You're listening to Kylie Baxter on ABC Radio Hobart and ABC Northern Tasmania.
How many cows do you think that we have in Australia? And what about just in Tasmania? Cows contribute to global warming. We hear it all the time. But there's an Aussie cattle farmer and an inventor who's come up with a way to reduce emissions. Mark Peart is the CEO and founder of CleverCow. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kylie. It's really nice to talk to you and all your listeners.
First of all, okay, how many cows are there in Tasmania?
There's about 550,000, I think.
Wow, 550 in Tasmania or in Australia?
There's 26 million head of cattle in Australia. So you're not the biggest producer, Queensland is, but you do some pretty heavy lifting down there.
Okay, tell us about your invention now, because this sounds really interesting. I was talking about it earlier on the Country Hour, just saying, you know, Tony Briscoe, who presents Country Hour, would be fascinated with this, probably knows a lot about it, in fact. But for anyone who hasn't heard, what is your invention?
Well, Kylie, we've been working really hard for the last 7 years in our parent company, DIT AgTech, to produce hardware where we can dose into the drinking water of livestock, especially in cattle, because as all your listeners would know, cattle have to drink every day, where we can then inject into their drinking water a small amount of a methane-reducing additive to reduce methane. But more importantly, because we're using technology, we know how much they're consuming, and we've overlaid a carbon project over the top of our technology platform. So farmers don't just reduce methane, they can actually produce a whole new revenue stream from selling their carbon credits that they produce. Okay,
before we talk about the carbon credit side of it and how that might work, what is in this additive?
So we're using our business is agnostic, because we know, we work with a great company you got in Tasmania called Sea Forest that are doing work in the seaweed, Asparagus. We're actually using a product called Agilent out of Switzerland, and the only reason we're using it is it's the only product at this point in time that's approved under a carbon project. The seaweed and some of the synthetics are not there yet. In time they will be. Our whole idea was to produce or invent the delivery system at scale, because we're not just focused on dairies and feedlots, Kylie. What a lot of your listeners may not understand is 92% of all cattle in this country are not in feedlots and dairies. They're actually in extensive agriculture in the middle of Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. So they're the cattle we're focused on by feeding this additive through the drinking water.
I'd be keen to hear from any farmers if you want to text into the program and you're listening. What are your thoughts? 0438 922 936. So now let's talk about the carbon credits, because, not every farmer wants to get involved necessarily. I think everybody cares a great deal about the environment. But if you don't want to buy this additive and put it in your water, because that in itself might be labour intensive, if you do, though, and you want to be able to sell your carbon credits, how does that work?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges with getting adoption of feeding methane additives, because it's a really contentious debate. And we, in our business and myself personally, we don't see cows as the problem to global warming. They definitely contribute, but methane is a natural cycle. We're big believers that cows are actually one of the solutions, because the less methane that we can put in the environment, the quicker we can cool the atmosphere down. So the more cows that are being fed these additives. But the problem, Kylie, with all the additives, they're very, very expensive. And the price that the big polluters are paying for carbon credits is so low, our poor old Aussie farmers can't make any money out of it. So it's very difficult. So what we've done is completely flip the switch. We're great believers that everyone in the country wants to do their bit to climate change. Everyone wants to support farmers. We're now selling carbon credits produced by farmers directly to consumers under our platform, CleverCow. And an everyday Aussie can buy a tonne of carbon off us on their credit card to offset their own unavoidable emissions. But more importantly, they can invest back into our Aussie farmers that are doing some of the great work to produce sustainable and healthy food for us. So it's a whole new concept. It's about the people empowering our farmers to do the heavy lifting, and about all of us getting together and doing our bit for climate change.
Somebody's texted into the program and wants to know if this is the same sort of concept, the additive, you know how people put rocks in dogs' water and then it stops them creating patches on the lawn. Is that the same thing or similar?
Yes. No, it's not the same. I can say that the product that we feed currently now has been around for 30 years. It's an essential oil. It's used in Europe extensively. But the great thing about agalin and these essential oils, it's completely safe to humans, it's safe to cattle, but we can get a methane reduction, and it's very cheap to produce 1 tonne of CO2 because we only administer 0.5 ml of agalin to 1 cow, which is a really small amount.
Why are you so passionate about this? What's driven you to do it, Mark?
Oh, Kylie, it's not my first rodeo in life. I'm 57, but I got to a stage in my life where
you made that sound like you were really old. I think all of our ABC listeners will be going, 57? So, hang on a minute, that's still quite young.
I got to a stage, I've been in the bush all my life, I've had businesses, and I just got to a stage where I want to feel like I was contributing and do something useful. And methane seems such a problem, and I'm such a passionate believer in farming and agriculture and healthy food. And I was getting sick and tired of the hard time that our farmers and cows were getting. So I thought maybe I should solve this problem and show everyone in the country how great cows are, how great farmers are, and actually use farmers and agriculture to solve climate change. Because what a lot of us don't realise, Holly, is that agriculture is one of the only industries we have on our planet that can actually reduce our emissions, but at the same time remove CO2. So farming is such a solution to climate change, while at the same time food security is really important to us as well.
Was there any catalyst? I mean, do you have children and perhaps as a dad you went, you know what, my kids are pressuring me to do something to, reduce climate change or emissions. I'm a farmer. I know what I can do. What was there any kind of catalyst that, tipped you over the edge?
That's a great question, Colin. It's very true, actually, that I've got teenagers and I could see how passionate they were about looking after the planet and the environment and nature. And my generation, maybe not so. But I thought, I've got an obligation to future generations, and I'm only one person. I've got a great team, 55 people in our business. But I thought, hey, I could lead a business and really make a difference for my kids and hopefully future generations. More importantly, farming is so important for civilization and food and those sort of things, that why not see and show people that farming can be a solution to climate change, not the villain, because that's the way we're portrayed at the moment. And I got sick and tired of hearing all these minority groups giving our farmers a really hard time. They're great custodians of the land. They love their animals. We just haven't been able to tell the story correctly to the metro areas.
I'd love to hear from any farmers that want to join the conversation. 0438 922 936. Are any farmers doing it here, using this additive to try and reduce methane emissions in Tasmania at the moment?
Not in Tasmania. Most of our growth has been in northern Australia. And, we're talking to farmers down there. We'd have a couple of thousand head of cattle now on our platform feeding methane-reducing additives. So the way our platform works is these particular farmers, we give them the technology and we give them the additive, and then we buy the carbon credits off them. We then fractionalise and tokenise these credits, and we sell them to consumers in Australia and soon all around the world. But on our whole platform in Northern Australia, we have about 200,000 head of cattle, and that's growing. We've got an ambition to have 1 million head of cattle on our technology platform within 36 months. And the vast majority of those farmers, I believe, will adopt methane initiatives like this to secure an additional revenue, because farming is very difficult, as we all know, but more importantly, to do their bit to help the environment.
And have you been down to Tassie and spent much time? Have you looked around to see the beautiful, rich soil? Because, we have had a dry last 12 months in a lot of areas, but it is such, a beautiful state for cattle farming and so many other things.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place, Nick. I've been down there many times where, as I said, we're talking to some farmers. We're talking to sea forest down there, but how we can collaborate together. I think some of the work that the Tasmanian farmers are doing with milk production and meat production is fantastic, because it's so healthy and sustainable. But I'm also inspired with the work that Sea Forest is doing down there on producing asparagus and hopefully also participating in showcasing farmers and doing their bit for climate change as well.
Well, good on you, Mark. Good to have a chat with you on the afternoon's program.
Good on you, Cole. Well, thank you very much, and thanks to all your listeners. Have a nice day.
Mark Peart, CleverCow founder and also CEO. It's 19 minutes to 2 on ABC Radio Hobart and ABC